Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to my reading recap of October 2024. Where I'm going to go over what I read this month, and more importantly, did I have a good time? Because that's what this is all about at the end of the day. I know what you're thinking. Owen, where have you been? You disappear for weeks without a peep, without a single word, and you come back with a book review like nothing ever happened? Listen, let me tell you something, okay? In October, I was down in the trenches for you, fighting for you, reading page after page, only to just give you a sliver of content, okay? Do you know how hard I work? Do you know how hard I labor just for you, okay? I don't have to explain myself to you. Quite frankly, I actually didn't read that much this month. Overall, I would say it was an okay month. In terms of, let's just get into the numbers straight ahead and we'll contextualize them later. 3 books read, and then 1,996 pages read this month. So, in terms of books read, we're on par. I think 3 is the lowest amount of books that I've read in a month. Maybe we had 1 month of 2. I don't really remember. In terms of pages read, actually slightly above average. So why is it a just okay month? Well, if you watched my what I'll be reading in October video, I think the writing was on the wall for a lot of this thing. So obviously, my main goals of the month was to read the next part of Midnight Tides, my Malazan reread, then obviously continue my Stormlight reread, reading Words of Radiance. So 2 big, dense fantasy books, and we have an ambitious goal to read all those Stormlight books before December. And I was kind of talking about how in that video, it's like the obligations of goals you set for yourself, rereading books, rereading long books, how much time it takes, and how it takes you away from like new books. And I was very ambitious with like the external stuff I was going to read, or the extra stuff I was going to read rather. I set an ambitious goal. I think it was like 5 books I said I was going to read, including a classic in the form of Three Musketeers. I didn't get to a lot of that stuff, guys. Just as a spoiler alert. So those 1,900 pages, that is like the 200 plus pages of Malazan for that one single part of the book. And then that was the entirety of Words of Radiance. And then other than that, we finished Dervish's Games, which is around 400 pages, and we did the review on the channel. And then we also did read Macbeth, and I said I was going to kind of deep dive into that. And starting with Macbeth, the kind of what I mentioned in my one I'm going to read in October, I did read it, so it is technically a book that I finished. However, it's like I just read it through once, right? I only just started like my deep dive into it. So I started doing like my watching some video essays about it, reading a little bbit more about it, because for those of you that have ever read a Shakespeare play, you read it the first time, you're like, I don't get it. I don't get what's going on, and I don't get the hype either. It's just a normal story, and every once in a while you'll read a line, it's like, oh, I've heard that line before. Why is it famous, though? I don't really get it. Don't really get the hype. So for me, it's a process for Shakespeare, right? I did the reading part first. This is the first dry read. Then you gotta get some context. You gotta get some maybe watch some clips of performances, or maybe watch an entire performance on YouTube or something like that, and then slowly start to immerse yourself into Shakespeare's work. It's a long, laborious process, and I don't expect a lot of people to ever want to do that, but it's something that I enjoy. And so while we did finish that book, it is technically one of the books we finished. That journey has only just begun, and it's not going to be talked about in these what I'm going to be reading videos anymore, because I already technically read it. So whatever I'm doing with that is kind of outside of reading, right? It's outside of that hobby. It's more like a theater analysis, play. It's Shakespeare analysis at this point. It's no longer reading. And not to say I won't ever make a video about it, but it's also Shakespeare stuff is so done, not to death, but just very, very in detail by thousands of people at this point. So there's not much I feel like I'll be able to discover or find about it, unless there's something about my process that I found particularly enlightening. But that's a video for another time, or potentially it's not a video for another time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But that was one of the books that we finished. Their Vicious Games, the review is out. That came out, and now when this is posted, that would be 2 days ago. Very fun read, very light, easy breezy. Not a life-changing book, but it was a book that I enjoyed. That was another book that I was reading with a group of friends. So it was a group read, so to be able to discuss where we thought the plot twists were going to be, who we thought was going to betray who, all that stuff. Reading a thriller with a group of people, I always find to be a lot of fun. And it was a good change of pace from this deep, or not always deep with Stormlight, but these long fantasy rereads, right? And kind of in that video, I said I was worried that I was rereading too much, I was doing too much, or setting too lofty goals for myself in terms of trying to finish all these Stormlight books, that I was afraid I might get burnt out. I wouldn't say I was burnt out in my review of, or my, I don't know if it's a review because I read it before, but my retrospective on Words of Radiance is going to come out shortly, and I think it might surprise some people about what I think about this book having read it the second time, especially considering my thoughts about it before I reread it, right? For those of you that don't know, like Words of Radiance is like one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. I thought it was fantastic, and like there were scenes in this book that like I just think about like, oh, that was such an awesome scene. Like when I read that, like I Mario Yahoo'd into the air. Like this was that book for me. I thought it was the best book in the Stormlight series. Upon a reread though, and I'll give you more specifics obviously in that video, it's like, it didn't hit me as hard as it did the first time. And I feel like more of, it felt a little bit flatter than I was used to. Not that I think it's a bad book now. I still think it's very good. It's a solid entry in the series. But I didn't love it like I loved it the first time I read it so many years ago, which I don't know if that's a reread thing. I don't know if that's a burnout of Stormlight thing. I don't know if that's a burnout on Sanderson thing. I don't know if I've just evolved so much as a reader I can't really appreciate it anymore. I don't know. That's something we'll have to explore in that dedicated video. Still enjoyed it. Still plan on continuing with the Stormlight reread, but this took me, not gonna lie, it did take me longer than I thought it would, even though it is, especially this paperback edition is like 1,300 pages. Very long book, right? And so reading it under a month is in and of itself impressive, but I really thought, like, especially like the end of Way of Kings is such like momentum carrying you through the last couple hundred pages. That didn't really happen to me with Words of Radiance, even though I do think the climax of this book is fairly satisfying. I found it less satisfying than Way of Kings, which I thought was interesting. So it just took me a little bit longer to read it. Malazan, we didn't finish that part until like 10 or I think it was like 10 or so days into the month. So just like, and that's like a more detailed read. That's like taking notes kind of reread. So that's a little bit slower, reading that alongside like such a monster book. I just didn't finish those two things as fast as I would have hoped, which kind of put us all behind schedule, right? And I said I wanted to read Three Musketeers, but I also said I wanted to take my time with it. So we reached a point when it's probably like the 24th or 25th of the month. I'm like, I could push through, finish Stormlight, and finish Their Vicious Games, and then just go straight ahead to Three Musketeers and try to finish it before the month. But I decided against it. I decided I really do want to savor that one. So spoiler alert, we're going to try to read it in November and dedicate some actual time to it, just so I could really appreciate it for what it is. And instead, I decided to knock Macbeth out of the way, because reading the play itself did not take me very long. It took me a day to read the whole thing. And like I said, obviously, like some of the homework I feel like I need to do to appreciate Macbeth will take a little bit longer than the actual reading itself. And that's another reason why I didn't just read like Olive Kitteridge, which I think will be a quick read as well. Like just, it's around 300 pages, I think a little bit less than 300 pages. Should be a nice, easy breezy read, but I decided not to go for this one and rather just go to Macbeth because it would even take me shorter to read Macbeth. So was I inflating my book read numbers by reading Macbeth? Maybe I was, okay? And you know what? If that's illegal, lock me up. But overall, you know, looking into November, how does this put us as we're shaping up to the end of the year? How does this put us like in channel wise, right? Because obviously I was gone for a couple weeks there, but I do have big plans. If you remember in November of last year, I did a lot of like ranking videos, but more like what are my favorite authors? What are the favorite types of books that I read leading up to like the recap of the year, right? Like my top 10 books of the year, my top 5 books of the year, like those kind of stuff. I don't think I'll be doing like one every week like I did in November last year, but I kind of like the idea of like November being like the check-in month of like, who am I as a reader? What do I enjoy? What do I like to do? That way, you know, it's like an entry point, because like we've had a lot of new people watch my videos or at least subscribe to the channel in the last few months. So like making another one of those videos, and my thoughts have changed since the last time I did that. So kind of updating people on that, and then also like as an entry point for new people, be like, what's this guy all about? All right? And why is he so handsome too? Maybe I'll answer that question later as well. But then we'll kind of do that in November, or at least I hope to do that in November, and that'll give us a little bit of more content while we're reading another big behemoth Stormlight book, because I feel like the reviews will be a little bit slower. Like I said, we have the Stormlight review to look forward to. I hope to finish Three Musketeers probably before or around the middle of the month, hopefully finish that, and then hopefully we're on pace to finish Oathbringer in the Stormlight reread, and then hopefully we throw in like a secondary book in there as well. But those videos will kind of prep us like, who am I? Who am I? Les Mis, anyone? And then we'll go into December where we can really start doing like the retrospective of the year. Book of the year. What was the book of the year? Which is something that I have not thought about in the slightest. What was my favorite book of the year? Do I even have like a book that blew me away this year? I quite frankly don't remember. I would have to look at the list and analyze and think and ponder perhaps. But overall, it's a solid month. I wouldn't say we're anywhere near a slump. That's for sure, because we read almost 2,000 pages, so props to me for that. And I feel good going into November. I think that, especially if I like Three Musketeers as much as I hope to, that'll just be a fantastic experience, and perhaps shape things up in terms of the rankings that I haven't made yet. So who knows? Who knows what life will bring? But I want to know. I want to check in with you guys. How you been? What are you reading? What are you reading up to? Are you starting to think about like your retrospectives yet of your year? Did you have any books you read this year that you just can't stop thinking about? All right. Or do you have any stinkers too? Oh, that'd be a funny list. A stinkers list? I don't read too many stinkers, to be honest with you. Not that you asked, but I tend to not hate a lot of books, or the books that I do hate, I have a very short memory on. So I just forget them. They're exited from my brain, thrown into the trash, never to be thought of again. I don't know. What are you guys up to? Right? I want to know. I'm genuinely curious. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see more like in the future. Thanks for sticking around.